been a bit of a roller coaster kind of round, as you know, and I'll try to organize this talk around something that's not, even though our mandate was really about equity and our fight was about equity, but NSOT is putting on an equity conference shortly, so I didn't want to preempt that. So instead, I'm going to focus on another aspect of our negotiations, not just for our negotiations, but across the country, so that we can focus on something else. But keep in mind that our mandate was really about equity, and I will talk about it a little bit as I go through my presentation. Just so that you understand, I'm going to share my screen. Is it visible now?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay, we never know, right, if it's visible or not. So what to do about obstructive negotiations in our sector? This is what we've encountered, and apparently we're not alone. Across Canada, there have been delays and surface bargaining, hard bargaining since COVID, right? And my question is what to do about it? Like, we're stuck in this reality right now that's very different. I mean, negotiations are usually adversarial in our sector, but this has been really over the top. In fact, it's pretty much unbelievable what's happening and what happened to us. So because I have a question to ask, I decided that it would be worth having a little bit of an interactive presentation today, as opposed to me talking for 45 minutes. So in the first part, I will talk to you about the context leading to our current negotiations briefly. And then I'll talk to you about what happened during the negotiations, and then the aftermath of that. So it's in 3 parts. I'm told I have 45 minutes. I'm going to try to respect that. So I figured 15 minutes per part, and each part I'm going to give you a brief presentation, and then I'm going to pose questions for you to reflect on and possibly give us answers. Because at the end of the day, we need to do something about this. We can't just say, oh, well, that's the new reality, and not solve this problem, because it is very dangerous, actually, for us to get into this, as you will see as I walk through the presentation. So about us, the MSVUFA, it's too bad we don't have a cute way of saying that. We represent some 160 faculty, librarian, and lab instructor members, and we've been unionized since 1988. The agreement we just tentatively and also ratified, but still haven't signed, from 2023 to 2026 is our 11th agreement. And we've always negotiated in-house until this round. So this was, again, I'll explain why this happened, and as I go through the before and the during and the after. What is important to note is that when the other party is your opponent, you're not negotiating. You're really just engaging in a battle of power and a test of wills. And believe you me, we had an extreme battle, and we went over the top with testing our wills. To the point where our team is probably suffering from PTSD at the moment. And that's really not necessary. And that's why I would like to have questions and answers through the presentation today. So ahead of negotiations, what happened, as you know, through COVID, a lot of unions decided to have rollovers, and that was our previous agreement was expiring in June 2021. And so at that time, that spring, it just so happened that several members of our senior admin resigned, left the university, and as we were preparing to negotiate a new agreement. And so the interim president at the time requested discussions to roll over the agreement. And we weren't really interested in that, because we were prepared. We had been preparing since 2018, when we had already had an LOU around indigenizing our collective agreement. And so we had a lot of stuff that we needed to do in this full round of negotiations in 2021. So we weren't very particularly interested in this. However, in the face of the fact that they would be negotiating with interim people who would not be able to make or want to make decisions that would affect a collective agreement, we decided that it would be a good idea to engage in those discussions. And so we did agree finally after 3 weeks of intense negotiations and discussions to a rollover agreement. But we had a proviso that LOUs, so we had 3 LOUs that were very important. They were in continuing our work on indigenizing our collective agreement and also decolonizing it. And the employer came back with LOUB, which was on applying an EDIA lens to the complete collective agreement. Our collective agreement is quite old, and we have not been successful in updating it at every round. So the 10 rounds before us, it's been very, very difficult. We have very difficult negotiations at our institution. And LOUC was a joint kind of request, was that we have an article, because as you know, the Mount has always had distance education. So first it was on TV, then it was on videotapes, and then it was online. And so our article regarding distance education was greatly outdated. It was still talking about broadcasting. So we both agree that this needed to be overhauled. And in fact, we all agreed at that time that the whole collective agreement needed a complete overhaul. And given the opportunity of a rollover, it gave us 2 years to prepare for this round, which started in 2023. So in 2023, in the fall of 2023, I was on sabbatical. So that's in the summer of 2022. Our new president was installed at the university, and I went on sabbatical. So in January of 2023, I asked to meet with the president as lead negotiator because I didn't know what was going to happen, because we still were in the search for our VP, so our VP academic and provost and our VP admin. In our context, we've always negotiated, the lead negotiator for the employer has always been the VP admin. And so since we didn't have one, I didn't know what was going to happen. And at that time, the university president told us that that was the reason why they were hiring a lawyer for the first time to lead their negotiations on this side, so that they could ensure full negotiations and not another rollover, because they didn't know where the search was at this point in January for those positions. And we still had interim people in those positions. So that was the reason that was provided. And also this president, as you know, is got EDIA written all over her, and insisted during this meeting that that was going to be the focus of these negotiations. And I said, yes, that's why we have our LOUs to indigenize, decolonize, and apply an EDIA lens to the complete collective agreement. So this was not a surprise. We had a good meeting. It didn't seem to be a surprise to this president. And ahead of this, because we had so much to work with, right, in our collective agreement, that we gave them a heads up and we submitted our information request in February because it would be extensive, and their complaint, because our collective agreement expires in June. And so we in the past would ask for the information in the spring, and that's when there's convocation, and that's when the fiscal year ends, and everybody's super busy at that time. And that was always their reason for not submitting information in a timely manner. So we said, okay, we'll just get ahead of that, where we know what we want because we've been preparing for this since 2021. So we submitted that information request in February. Of course, as expected, we never heard anything from them about it. So we had to continuously press about when is that information coming? And clearly their excuse in the past that they were too busy at the springtime was just an excuse. So in April, they informed us who their lead negotiator was going to be, and that was Tara Erskine. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. I received an introductory email from her. And in that introductory email, she asked to delay starting negotiations until the 2 VPs are in place. And I wrote back and I said, well, what kind of delay are you talking about? Because typically we negotiate, we submit we notify the employer ready to negotiate within the 60 days as the Trade Union Act requires. And we usually started negotiating in June, mid-June around. And then the bulk of the negotiations would occur during the summer. And so it's okay to say, okay, we can delay for a little bit, but there was no, and of course, there was no response to my question as to how long a delay they were asking. So in May, in that silence, we did send our notice to bargain, as we're required to do, as pursuant to the Trade Union Act. And so the president of our association sent the notice. Typically, we ask that the lead negotiators meet to set dates. And in this case, we wanted to also discuss protocols, because it would be a different kind of round, given that we were overhauling the collective agreement. And this was a contract agreement from 2021. The Board of Governors lead negotiation requests, in response to this, requests our teams to meet to discuss protocols. And so we say, okay, we'll agree to that. Usually it wasn't the whole teams that would that would meet. It would be just the lead negotiators would meet and hash out a table of possible dates. And in this case, we also wanted to talk about protocols. So we said, okay, well, if they want, the lead negotiator doesn't know us, right? She's an external lawyer. And so it would be maybe an opportunity to meet the teams. So we agree, but with the proviso that also dates be set at this meeting. No response. So we show up at this meeting and we learn that the Board of Governors team is not coming to the table before mid-September, which was a big surprise to us, because our university president had said that's why they hired a lawyer to lead the negotiations, because the new VPs would not be in place in time to negotiate fully as we do in the summer. So all of a sudden, this hired lawyer cannot be available till mid-September. And the reason provided was that the VPs are not there. That was one reason. And one of their members, so on our employer's team, there's always been the VP admin, who was the lead negotiator. And then there would be one dean, so that would be the only academic at the table. Then there would be the director of human resource, the director of finance, and then a support person from the vice president's office. And so the manager of academic relations. They appointed on their team a dean that was going on admin leave for the summer. So they said that's why they couldn't meet in the summer, was because the two VPs weren't there, and the dean was also on admin leave. We said, well, you didn't have to pick this dean. There are other deans, and we don't need the VPs. They're not at the table. So we said we couldn't make heads or tails of their reasons. And so we went back and we didn't agree to any protocols, obviously, without dates. We didn't agree with starting in mid-September. That compromises us, as you know. Our strike power is, we only have a short window for a powerful strike, and that's the fall or winter term. And knowing the process of negotiating and then conciliation and preparing for a strike, starting in mid-September was putting us in a vulnerable position. So we walked away from this meeting quite disappointed with the outcome. But we were creative, we tried to solve the problem, and we came up with a solution. So we proposed to them that one way around this would be we proposed multiple days and hours during July and August, at which time we would present our complete package of proposals, and we provide them with all the written rationales and so forth. Because we knew that one VP was coming on 10 July, and the other VP was coming on 1 August, and the dean that was on that mid-leave was coming back at the end of August. So if they could sit none of these people except the dean, but they could have put somebody else at the table. Like I said, it was it's not correct to appoint somebody is not available. But anyway, that was what we were dealing with. And so we said all they'd have to do is allow us 5 full days. We said we just need 5 full days out of all these times that we offered and dates to present to them and explain our proposals. And then we'd supply them with the written proposals and rationales. We also would build in some time for the Board of Governor team to ask questions or have responses if they so wished. And this would allow, therefore, the new VPs to review and prepare because they'd have all our package. And because their thing was that they wanted the VPs to help them prepare their proposals. So they were clearly not prepared, which is shocking because, like I said, we had LOUs and a rollover agreement in 2021, and they should have been prepared for this round. But they looked like they didn't have anything ready to go. And then by doing this would allow time for the new VPs to review, would allow time for their dean member to catch up, and then to prepare as they suggested. And we begin table negotiations in mid-September. But at least we would have done all this work ahead of time and not start from scratch in mid-September. Well, as we expected, it was rejected because we knew by now that these were just reasons and excuses to delay. So these are delay tactics, and we were well aware of that. We're not green negotiators, and so we knew what they were up to, and we were trying to be creative in solving this problem. We then filed a complaint with the labor board because we said there were a few things that didn't jive. First of all, it says, that you shouldn't appoint people on a team that is not available. And also, it also tells us that you need to be ready within the 60 days. You have 20 clear days to get together and start negotiating in good faith and move as quickly as possible to reach an agreement. Neither of those things were happening given the situation. So we filed a complaint with the labor board on 12 June. It took the Board of Governors till 4 July to respond to the complaint, dragging their feet again. And then the labor board wrote to the two parties on 11 July, asking the Board of Governors their reasons for rejecting our solution, because we had explained that in our complaint, that we had offered this solution that would accommodate them. So we're being accommodating. We'd say, okay, we'll work around your unavailability to negotiate, but you're clearly available to listen and receive, right? So we could table our proposals. So the labor board asked the board for their reasons, and it took them till the 21st of July. They didn't respond, but we had our case management conference on 21 July, and the Board of Governors at this point continued with their flip-flopping. That is because the dean was on admin leave, and then they said, well, you should have appointed somebody who was available to be on your team. And they said, well, it's not really that. It's that the two VPs are just arriving. One's just arrived, and the other one's arriving on the 1st of August. I say, well, but they're not at the table. So what's the point of that? Anyway, the lawyer was flip-flopping constantly. And at the end of the day, the labor board decided that waiting for a hearing, which would occur in October, would be ridiculous. And the whole point was to get them at the table in the summertime. And so the Board of Governors then said, okay, we'll require that we be allowed to submit formal submissions as opposed to just going by the complaint and the response to the complaint. The lawyer wanted to have an opportunity to submit a full submission, formal submission with jurisprudence and etc. So the board said, okay, but we'll give you just 1 week because of the time. The whole point here is we wanted to be at the table in the summer. That was our complaint, and they gave us, both parties actually, a chance to submit formal submissions by the 28th of July, so that now a group of the labor board would look at this and come up with a decision. So on 2 August, we received the decision. It was simply a decision, and it said that the labor board unanimously decides to dismiss our complaint and would provide reasons later. We got the reasons late October. But in effect, what happened was they believed the Board of Governors that they were really, those people were key. The dean and the two VPs were key for them to prepare, and that consequently, by starting negotiations in mid-September, they would be prepared, and that was like their solution to the problem. As you can imagine, filing a complaint and getting responses and then filing formal submissions, etc., took many, many hours, many days over the summer. And we have like 600 pages of documents, I think, for this complaint. And so we spent more time and effort getting them or trying to get them to the table than actually negotiating the agreement. Like, it was ridiculous. We spent more time doing this than we could have done the negotiations, and we could have had an agreement by the time we got the decision from the labor board. It was very frustrating, was very time consuming, and obviously very costly for our university to engage in this. So that was like ahead of our negotiations. So that's what we're going to come into when we start in mid-September. So here are my questions for you. I always tell my students, I teach teachers and I teach pre-service teachers, teachers to be, and they have an Education Act to follow, and that's their box. And so trying to be creative outside of the box is not an option. They have to be creative inside the box. And I always tell them, how do you, that's why your creativity has to come from, because you're not going to change the Education Act. You're not going to change the curricula. You're just going to have to be creative inside that box. Well, in negotiations, the box is the Trade Union Act. And how do we deal with that? And how can we be creative dealing with this Trade Union Act, which, by the way, is quite outdated itself. When you look at it from cover to cover, there are things in there that it too needs an overhaul, but that's not our job as academic unions. But in the section 35A, it says shall, without delay, but in any case, within 20 clear days after the notice was given, or such further time as the parties may agree, meet and commence to bargain collectively with one another. In our complaint, the employer used our first initial meeting of May of the two teams as satisfying this condition, which wasn't. We didn't do any negotiations at that meeting. It was simply to set dates and discuss protocols for upcoming negotiations. But the labor board thought that it was meeting this condition of the Trade Union Act, Section 35A. Now, my question to you is, looking back, is what could we have done better or differently? And what can we all do to avoid such obvious delay tactics?
Maybe I'll just ask Aaron if this is the moment. Maybe you could stop recording just when people are engaging a little bit. So if that's possible.
I can do that.